Albert the Great. And Albert the Great taught Aquinas all of that there was to know about Aristotle. And one of the things that he does, that Aquinas does, is he uses these ideas to construct his Summa Theologia, and then he writes a number of commentaries on all of Aristotle's works. And one of the things that he does in particular is he goes to the Politics, and he writes a commentary on the Politics. Now, he doesn't write a complete commentary. He only really covers the first 2 chapters of the Politics. And he takes some of the ideas from that, and he also takes ideas that he got from Augustine, and basically he comes up with 4 primary economic actions. Types of economic actions. You have production, exchange, distribution of giving, and consumption of use. And really, this set the stage for where economics should be going. And so, a few hundred years after Aquinas, you have the Dominicans, who are still carrying on his works. And basically, the school of Salamanca in Spain, what they do is you have a bunch of these guys, and what they're doing is they're taking bits and pieces of what Aquinas has written, and they're applying them to different aspects of government and economy, and they're writing all these little articles. And this begins what's known as the Salamanca School of Economics. And eventually, it makes its way into Portugal, the University of Coimbra, and so it expands, and then eventually you have both Franciscans and Jesuits who join in this work. And so what you wind up with over a few hundred years is this large body of literature that is written on economics. And this kind of brings us to the classical period in political economy. What you see runs from 1776 to 1870. Now, what happens in 1776? Okay, it's published in 1976. Okay, what else happens in 1976? Okay, yeah, the American Revolution. Now, a lot of people will wonder, hey, how does he affect America's political economy? Well, the truth of the matter is, he doesn't. What happened was in the United States, in America, what was happening is these colonists were more or less free to do their own thing. And a lot of what they did turned out to be in line with what Adam Smith was writing. Okay, so here are the dominant theories that existed around this time. And the first is mercantilism, and then you also have the physiocrats, and we're going to take a look at those in a minute. Now, Bernard Mandeville and Adam Smith, they were both free marketers, but they had different views, and we're gonna look at that in just a moment. So here's what mercantilism does. It's a doctrine that says that government control of foreign trade is of paramount importance. And so basically, what you have is this idea that basically wealth is all about gold and silver and precious stones and that sort of thing, and that a country grows wealthier by gaining more of that and controlling what they actually sell, and selling only to their advantage, and buying only when it's advantageous. And so when you did trade, you had to make sure it was on basically government-owned ships, to make sure that it would benefit you and that sort of thing, and that those ships would be run by government crews to make sure that it was advantageous to the government. And so it was a rather controlled system, and the truth of the matter is it really didn't make anybody any wealthier, because basically they were operating with what Jay was talking about last night as a zero-sum game. There's only so much wealth to be had, and one only grows richer by making the other poorer. That was the underlying presupposition behind mercantilism. Now, the physiocrats, on the other hand, they believed that wealth was generated primarily through agriculture. And so they were really big about, growing more food, producing more products so that more goods could be produced, that sort of thing. And this was an idea that was held mainly by the French. But now let's look at the free market approach. And there's two people, Bernard Mandeville and Adam Smith, who held this position. Now, Mandeville is famous for his book, The Fable of the Bees. And here's what he essentially argues. He argues that a free market system is good, but it's really based upon vice, like greed. Now, last night, Jay was talking about how greed is an idea that a lot of people try to equate with the free market system. Well, that's really in line with what Mandeville was arguing, that basically it's a system based on greed, and that greed and vice is what drives a free market economic system, and it's really productive. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher, okay? And in fact, people, when you talk about Adam Smith, they'll tell you, well, he was the first economist, and he was a great economist, okay? If you were to ask Adam Smith what he was, he would tell you he was a moral philosopher. And this is an idea that goes all the way back, as we saw, to Aristotle, okay? And for him, political economy has to be virtuous. It's not the kind of thing that can be driven by greed. It simply can't be. Because, he wasn't a Christian, but he had the idea that there was a God who had ordered everything. Just like Jacob Viner had said, a God who had ordered things and had designed men in a certain sort of way to be virtuous. So why would a God who designed men to be virtuous create an economic system that produces wealth that requires vice? Why would God do that? That didn't make sense to him. And so one of the reasons that Mandeville's idea didn't catch on was because he had the wrong moral system. Okay, so one of his first works was The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it's a book about human nature and about virtues. Now, a lot of people attach utilitarianism to Adam Smith. And his teacher, Francis Hutcheson, was the one who invented utilitarianism. But the thing is, he still held to virtue and vice as being prime drivers in human behavior and motivation and everything. He still was he had a place for utilitarianism, but he was still teleological in his viewpoint, and he still had a very high place for virtue in his system. And one of the things that he was interested in doing was he was interested in producing something like Isaac Newton's Principia that would reduce economics to a single ultimate moral principle. And so you remember with Aquinas you had these four categories of economic activity. Well, what he does is he boils them down to just two. And so one of the things he does is he eliminates Augustine's theory of personal distribution, and he creates what's called a labor theory of value. And the labor theory of value says this: the value of a thing is the amount of work that goes into making that thing. And this idea takes economics down the wrong road for the next 80 years. Now, he was right about a lot of things, but he was wrong on this point. And the interesting thing is, Karl Marx picks up on his labor theory of value and incorporates it into his political economic system. Now, Harvard professor Joseph Schumpeter says this about Adam Smith. He says that what Smith did that was good was not original, and what he did that was original was not good. Okay, so one of his contemporaries is this guy, David Ricardo. And he is known for his theory of comparative advantage. And what he argues is that what needs to happen is for countries to do better is the need for trade, because basically there's what are called comparative advantages, and then there's what are absolute advantages. And basically what he shows is no matter which country has the absolute advantage, both are better off if they trade, because there are efficiencies that come with that kind of system. John Stuart Mill also was a British empiricist. He was a moral philosopher, among other things. And here's one of the things that I think is important to note. He believed that progressive taxation essentially was stealing. Well, you know, most of you haven't lived long enough to really appreciate just how right he is. But rest assured, that time will come for most of you. Well, some of you are going to do stupid things and get yourself killed and all, you know. What's that? Or stay in the very low income bracket. That's right. So, here is a very important idea by Jean-Baptiste Say, and basically it is this idea that it is production that drives the economy, or supply creates its own demand, okay? This is a very important idea, because later on when we get to the neoclassical system and neoclassical period, there are some people who are going to go the other way on this. Okay, now we got these guys. Okay, you got to